have to describe for you how a worldwide pandemic has turned our schools and communities and lives upside down. School closures as a result of COVID have opened a lot of eyes to the inequities that have perpetuated educational achievement gaps for as long as anyone can remember. More than ever, we see and hear about real-time examples of what it actually looks like in different parts of the state to keep kids and teachers safe, to provide equitable access to technology and bridge the digital divide, to support access to affordable, quality early learning and higher education, and so much more. In addition, helping to put an even finer point on educational and other inequities is the current climate around racial injustice, which, among other things, has highlighted just how important it is to ensure that we intentionally elevate the voices of Black, Latino, and Native American Arizonans. Expect More Arizona is laser focused on meeting the goals in the Education Progress Meter. We know the only way to accomplish this is to ensure that we are closing the achievement gaps and supporting our students of color. Today, you'll hear from education and community leaders about local efforts to advance the goals and the critical role that Expect More Arizona is playing. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to Christine Thompson, Expect More Arizona's President and CEO.
Thanks so much, Tracy, and thank you all for joining us here today. We're so excited to have you. You know, as a state, we collectively have some really big goals for Arizona, and those are embodied in the Arizona Education Progress Meter. They are audacious. Just to name a couple, we want to double the number of children in quality early learning settings. And that effort to double was raised before the pandemic, and we know there's been an impact on the number of students in quality early learning settings. We need to add 1 million adults with some type of credential or degree in Arizona to meet our Achieve 60 goal by 2030. As some of you have heard me say before, it's worth saying again, there's no way to meet the goals that we have as a state unless we address and close the achievement gaps for students of color, those in poverty, and all other marginalized students as well. We already have these steep goals to meet in the state, and then the pandemic happened. The COVID pandemic has really changed education as we know it at every level. And while the full impact of COVID and the pandemic is still unknown on our educational systems, we know that thousands of children have been without access to quality early learning settings and childcare. We know the entire K-12 system has been flipped on its head. The model has been turned upside down as students are have education delivered to them virtually and also in hybrid formats. We know many families have changed schools or chosen to homeschool, and post-secondary institutions are doing the best they can to deliver education in the safest environment possible, whether that's in person or online. Without question, we need to do everything we can to limit the widening of our achievement gaps and work to close them. Expect More Arizona sees ourselves as the catalyst for advancing the goals of the Arizona Education Progress Meter. We partner with community leaders across the state to take action to help meet those goals. Today, we'd like to share with you how we're doing this by hearing from some of our key partners across the state. First, you'll hear from Dr. Klippenstein, president of Mojave Community College. Since December, we've been convening leaders from Mojave and La Paz counties to focus on setting their own attainment goal, thus helping the state meet its goal. Their work is innovative and it's driving collaboration, bringing partners together that may not have worked together before. And we're so excited to share their story with you. Dr. K, can you please join us and tell us a little bit about more of the work that you're doing in Mojave and La Paz counties?
You bet, Christine. Thank you all very, very much for attending today's session. I'm the president of Mojave Community College. I've been here really since July 1st of 2019. Was the previous president at Miles Community College in Montana and spent a number of years in leadership positions at various different four-year institutions, including a long time ago at Northern Arizona University. But it's my pleasure to be back in this area. I'm excited to be here tonight to share a brief story about Northwest Arizona Attainment Steering Committee that we developed over the last 6 to 8 months. First, I would like to thank Christine and Donna Davis from Expect More Arizona for their continued support. Donna has been a wonderful asset to the Northwest Attainment Steering Committee, and Expect More Arizona and their education progress meter and goals, coupled with the work from Achieve 60, has been very, very helpful. The work established or accomplished in Mojave and La Paz counties would not have happened if it were not for Expect More Arizona and the Achieve 60 Arizona leadership team. Their leadership, their knowledge, and their data sources have been incredible and outstanding. So I greatly want to say I greatly appreciate the work that they have done. And what I want to do is be able to kind of break down what we're doing here in Mojave and La Paz counties in a few different chunks. First, I want to talk about the why. Mojave and La Paz County attainment numbers are lower than other counties in Arizona. So depending on what you're looking at, it could be anywhere from 25% of those in La Paz and Mojave County combined that have a 2-year or a 4-year degree. So again, only 25%. If you add in industry recognized credentials, other types of certificates, you'll probably bump that up to 38 to 42%. MCC itself is an open access community college with a mission to help educate a skilled workforce, along with providing early start, dual enrollment, and transfer pathways for those who really do desire to achieve a bachelor's degree. When I look at our enrollment, most of our students are first generation, roughly over 70%, same as Arizona Western College, about 70% or higher are first generation college students. We also have a large amount of students who are low income, and also those we're getting an increased enrollment in our Hispanic populations. Mojave Community College has a big goal. It's called Bighorn Intrepid Goal, and it states that all adults who have not yet completed a post-secondary degree will be inspired to attain the credentials and certificate or even a degree they seek for Mojave Community College by 2030. It's a big goal, and we understand it, but as you could tell from that, we're really attempting to focus on our adult learners. Taking a look at the rural Arizona and the equity perspective. Rural serving institutions such as Mojave Community College and even Arizona Western have a higher first generation college student rate, as I described earlier. We have more adults, more economically disadvantaged students, and students dealing with broadband and other access style of issues. Especially during the coronavirus pandemic, most of our response has been providing education in a remote and or online setting, and therefore that broadband and other type of access issues has become more evident. Rural community colleges may also have a higher level of incoming students needing remedial and developmental education in reading and math. If you break that down by demographics and ethnicity, you will find that students who are Hispanic will find that they are needing remedial or developmental education at a higher rate. Looking at the education progress meter, there are a few items as I will talk about our community hub focus here in a minute. I hope that we in the community hub focus, community hub groups will be able to spend some time to review and monitor. Here's just a few examples if you get on the education progress meter and look at La Paz and Mojave counties and even some of the cities and communities within La Paz and Mojave. If you look at 3rd grade reading and 8th grade math metrics, La Paz and Mojave are behind the state average. In Bullhead City, 8th grade math, 30% of our students coming, 8th graders in Bullhead are prepared to be successful in high school math, compared to the state average of 46%. 16% of Hispanic students versus 36% white students are prepared, and 22% are prepared to be successful in high school math who are economically disadvantaged. So just by those numbers right there, those are some items that our community hub in Bullhead City can really take a look at, work with the K through 12 system, work with business and industry leaders, chambers, chamber leaders, economic development leaders, city officials, and so forth, to come up with plans to see if we can change and improve that gap. When you look at post-high school enrollment and post-secondary education, Mojave and La Paz, again, are behind the state average. When you look at attainment, again, we are at 25% with 2- and 4-year degrees, well behind the state average. So we know we have work to do here in La Paz and Mojave counties. We also know that we want to provide economic viability to our counties we serve. We want job growth. We want to meet the workforce demands. We need a skilled workforce, and many in the career, technical, and health professions. We have many high demand occupations. We want to be able to provide students with an education to help increase wages and therefore provide an economic impact for Mojave and La Paz counties. So what we did is we created a team, and that is a steering committee. That is the Northwest Attainment Steering Committee. It was a collaborative approach with various members of the communities we serve. It was city officials, economic development, chamber, Arizona at Work, school district, CTED representation, ASU Lake Havasu, Arizona Western MCC, and Expect More Arizona, and Achieve 60 folks, business leaders. They all came together to develop a steering committee. We all had the same desire to close the attainment gap. So the purpose, we developed a mission statement called the Northwest Regional Attainment Committee Mission Statement, which our goal is to assist Mojave and La Paz County communities in designing and achieving initiatives aimed at increasing industry recognized credentials, certificates, and degree attainment to close the workforce gaps and improve economic vitality. That's our mission statement. Our goals and strategies mirror exactly Achieve 60's pillars and strategies. If you have a chance to look at those, Pillar 1 gets into early childhood through high school, Pillar 2, post-secondary access and success, Pillar 3, workforce and business development, so on. We did develop key performance indicators as well. So as we move this work forward, we want our community hubs as well as the steering committee to really review items related to the percent of Arizona residents aged 25 and 64 who have completed a 2- and 4-year degree or an industry recognized credential. We want to look at the percent of high school students attaining industry recognized credentials through JTED and WAVE programs in La Paz and Mojave counties. We want to look at the percent of high school graduates enrolled in post-secondary education. And we want to look at the percent of high school students who graduate in 4 years, as well as the percent of 8th grade students who are prepared to be successful in high school math. Our goal is to close the attainment gap, provide a better labor and market, provide a better labor workforce, and close the labor market gaps. The one of the things that we also did was reviewed the talent hub designations, and we sought the advice of our representatives from Las Vegas. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So the process, the steering committee established 5 community hubs. We identified leads from each of those communities and also initial membership. The steering committee, with the help of Expect More Arizona, hosted a community hub convening on September 24th. This allowed each community hub to meet, begin to establish plans, review data presented by Dr. Joel O'Reilly from ASU, and heard from leaders of the Las Vegas Talent Hub. Community hubs are now active. Meetings have already been established and data is already being shared. The 5 community hubs include the Arizona Strip or Colorado City, Kingman, Lake Havasu, Bullhead City, and Parker. The steering committee will remain an active oversight team and provide data assistance, help review funding resources, and assist with membership growth. We are well on our way and we're really excited about this opportunity. And again, we cannot have done this without the help of Expect More Arizona and the Achieve 60 Arizona team. Thank you very much for allowing me to be on the call today. Thank you.
Dr. K, thank you so much for joining us. You know, the work that's happening in Mojave and La Paz County is just inspiring. It's a testament to the collaboration and just such a great example to everyone across the state. Your focus on data and equity and really the connections between everything from early ed to higher ed are assets to your work, and we thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'd like to share another key strategy that we're using to accelerate progress to the goals in the Arizona Education Progress Meter. We're convening local councils of business, education, municipal, and community leaders to elevate the Arizona Education Progress Meter goals as a priority for their own communities. We serve as the backbone organization in 2 local councils, one in Yuma and one in Douglas. Each council drives the work that they feel is important for their own communities. They're doing things like building relationships with policymakers, hosting events to support teachers in their community, appearing on local talk radio shows monthly, and so much more. Right now, we're going to share a brief video with you about the Douglas Education Partnership Council to give you a feel for the work that they're doing and how Expect More Arizona is supporting their efforts.
The Douglas Education Partnership Council is a group of businesses, education, municipal, and community leaders working together to advance a shared vision for education at the local and statewide level. The council's actions are driven by the belief that every student deserves an excellent education every step of the way. We also know that the success of our students impacts the strength of our workforce and our local economy.
The council plays such a vital role in our community because for the first time ever, we have an interdisciplinary group of individuals from different sectors working together to address rural education challenges. Our geopolitical location and socioeconomic barriers contribute to greater education disparities and economic inequalities. The unique set of solutions that starts with casting a shared vision for education is what our council is all about.
This is such a critical time to focus the community on ensuring every student succeeds. Already persistent achievement gaps in Douglas and Cochise County have only been exacerbated by the recent disruption to student learning. To ensure no students slip through the cracks, the council is working to create a community-owned, data-driven education dashboard. Using this dashboard, we will implement proven programs, drive collection actions towards strategic solutions, align local education systems, and ensure all Douglas students reach their potential.
For the past 2 years, the Douglas Education Partnership Council has focused our efforts on raising awareness in the Douglas community around important education issues. As Douglas citizens, we can collectively make an impact on these educational challenges if we come together with a unified voice and strategy. We are proud of leading these efforts, yet we understand that creating systemic change in education takes time. As a council, we look forward to continuing to serve the community in this way, and we can't wait to share more successes in the years to come.
The Douglas Council has made such huge strides in building public support for education and is now creating, as they mentioned, a data dashboard, modeling it after the Arizona Education Progress Meter. They know that what gets measured gets done, and that sharing relevant data with their community has power to drive action. Switching gears just a bit, we've invited Thomas Claiborne from My Brother's Keeper Collective, a partner of ours in Tempe, to tell us about their work, to share his personal story about why increasing Arizona's collective focus on equity should be a priority, and how the Education Progress Meter plays a role. Thomas?
Excellent. Thank you so much. I wanted to start off by just sharing my gratitude and thankfulness for all of you all who are on this call. I am a direct result of people like you and the work that you have done. I want to share kind of how I got here to Phoenix, Arizona. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I played football. I ended up getting a football scholarship to a historical Black college and university in Washington, D.C., called Howard University. And there, my freshman year, first semester, I met a man. His name is Daryl Morrison, who he's now a pastor here in Phoenix, Arizona. But he grew up right here in South Phoenix, Arizona. And because of people like you all, the work that you all do, that's very similar to Expect More Arizona back in the 80s, he was part of a program where they began busing students from South Phoenix out to the area of Scottsdale to Camelback High School so that they could have a better, more world-class education. And from there, he ended up playing football, went to junior college, Phoenix, I think it was Phoenix College, actually. And then he got a scholarship to the University of Arizona. And then later he got drafted to the Washington Redskins. And after he ended his career playing with the Washington Redskins, now the Washington football team, he began mentoring and kind of doing some spiritual coaching on our campus. And that's when I met him. And when I met him, he began to encourage me and to strengthen me as a young man and mentor me. And then he ended up actually facilitating my wife and our wedding. And then 21 years later, for him moving away from Phoenix, Arizona, he decided to move back here to start a church. My wife and I were part of that team. And we strategically moved to South Phoenix so I can do mentoring right in the same area by which he grew up at. I literally live 3 blocks away from where he grew up at. So I'm a direct result of a world-class education that was given to a gentleman where he was able to be successful and succeed. And then now we're actually pouring back into the same community by which he grew up in. So again, thank you all for being a part of what this is, because this is a winning strategy. I wanted to share also just kind of the barriers that the children by which we're facing that makes it difficult for the achievement educational inequity. And one of the main barriers is what I would call the main barriers are not knowing the direct roadmap towards success. And there's 2 games that people are playing in life. There's an infinite game, and then there's the finite games. Finite games are where you know what the players are, you know how to keep score, and you know how long the game's going to be. But the infinite game is when there's known players and unknown players. You don't know how long the game goes. And then you also don't know exactly how to keep score. So usually when you find minorities and when they're on successful tracks, they're usually really successful in finite games. That's why you see majority of minorities in football and baseball and basketball. We thrive in those environments where we can keep score, we're clear on what the goal is and what success means, and then you can aim and you can get that. Where they get in trouble is when there's no stability. And if you haven't had someone to kind of guide you through that course and that track, it makes it really difficult. And that's where you see the majority of the issues. But the progress meter that Expect More Arizona presents, it helps us keep score, and it helps us achieve and show very clear goals for all of our students to be successful. So now, because of what Expect More Arizona has created, and what we have with this progress meter, now when I'm sitting down with some of the students that I'm encouraging and I'm mentoring and I'm trying to show them their pathway to success, I can say, okay, this is where you're at. These are kind of the resources and tools that you haven't had, but now this is our goal. This is where we're going to get there. And then these are resources and tools that we can add to that equation. So the last thing that I will literally lead to in conclusion is just the path forward. I believe that this shared belief and vision of the movement of a world-class education positions all of our children to succeed. Expect More Arizona, it has a strategy for victory, which is that interdependence with what I call intentional interdependence, also known as like collective action or collective impact, and being that backbone organization and being able to make sure that we have very clear, timely data and data that is up to date to allow us to make the proper adjustments for any child that's sitting in front of us. I would just end with that again is what helps us overcome the barriers for these students. And there's a W.E.B. Du Bois quote where it says, "Children learn more from what you are than from what you teach." And as we demonstrate this winning philosophy of collective impact, where all sectors are working together, serving together, and we're demonstrating that for our children, they'll be able to reflect who we are as a winning and thriving community. And that will be, well, I'll say one last thing as well on how this is proven as a success for me, because as I stated, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I call it the championship way because the Steelers, Pittsburgh Steelers, are the home of the 6-time Super Bowl champions, and it's also the area where all the sectors work together. So we had winning sports teams. That's also where Mr. Rogers was his home base, and we also had Andrew Carnegie was there. So we had thriving businesses and libraries, and August Wilson, where we had the arts and entertainment. So all those sectors working together is really what helped me thrive. And again, I think you all are creating this platform. So thank you all for your support of this.
Thomas, thank you so much for sharing your inspirational story. We're so grateful for you, for your work, and for our partnership together in moving education forward. We're thrilled that our work and the Arizona Education Progress Meter can serve as a source of data to help communities keep score, as you put it, and to help advance support and catalyze change. There's such a great opportunity to elevate educational equity statewide and as you said, work together in concert to impact thousands of, frankly, 1 million students statewide. Now I'm going to turn things back over to Tracy to kind of tee up our question and answer with our panelists. Tracy?
Great, thank you, Christine. And thank you so much to our guest speakers, Dr. Kay and Thomas. It's really inspirational and informative to get your firsthand perspective about this work. So thank you again. We have a little time for Q&A with our speakers. So if any of today's webinar attendees have a question for our panelists, Christine or myself, please submit them in the Q&A box and we'll do our best to respond to as many as possible. Erin, can you please share with us the questions, if any come in?
Yes, I sure can. And I'd invite our panelists, Thomas, and I see Dr. Kay, to come back with video. I'll go ahead and ask a question or two while we're waiting for any questions from the audience. And thank you again. Your remarks were very, very insightful, and it's inspirational too. I'm curious, drawing from something that you said, Thomas, you talked about how you saw in Pittsburgh the community, education, business, and community leaders working together to make their economy, their community stronger. So I'm curious, for all of our panelists, what advice would you have for Arizona education, business, and community leaders as we work together to support education and close achievement gaps?
Well, in response to, first, I would just say it's like this to me is the roadmap for success. The fact that you all have very clear goals and objectives, and being able to go into the community and being able to communicate to that to any of the families that may not have, especially that first gen of college students. Again, my mentor, he was first gen college student. So as we're trying to pour back into the students, it's just giving them a visual or giving them an image of something to aim for. Like that's one of the main things. Like both of my father went to college, my grandparents, my aunts, they all went to college. So I kind of was always shaped and framed around that. So college was always an expectation for me. Like that was just one thing that I knew that I was going towards. So I think as long as we can continue to put that in front of the students, and we can encourage all of the key players around to know that, hey, just the imagery of this and allowing them to give them a clear roadmap, and this is their next milestone to hit, like we can all rally around them and pointing them towards that one direction.
And Erin, I would agree with that. I appreciate Thomas's comments and his story as well. It's incredible. I would say that the way that the data is in front of us, the information is in front of us, the education progress meter and many other data points. Even the 10 community college districts in the state of Arizona have 33 metrics that we track that's directly associated with Achieve 60 initiatives. One of the things I would say that's very important is for business industries, the chamber folks, and things that we're seeing here in Mojave and La Paz counties, is that when they get together and they start to see some of this, the education progress meter, and you start to dig down, as I said before, that 8th grade math, people in Bullhead now have that opportunity, business leaders, industry leaders, city officials, to really say, how do we step up and help our K through 12 partners? Because it's not about the K through 12 partners. There's an equity piece for us to be able to build as a community, to be able to address the changes or the differences in between maybe our Hispanic students or economically disadvantaged students versus maybe our white students in those communities. And that's what it's all about, is getting that data in front of those folks. And that's what we're starting to see from our community hubs, because we establish a lot of different types of data points and we'll continue to grow it. And there are some other data points that really specifically get at this, but the Education Progress Meter really does share a story, and we need to listen to that story.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Aaron, I will say this too, that I'm actually a first generation college student, but I didn't have some of the same barriers as other first generation college students have, or things that I have seen here in Mojave County. When you take first generation with other barriers potentially, whether it be something that's centered around ethnicity or low income or whatever else, you combine all those and it makes it even a tougher track. And we need to not develop policies and procedures for the mass. We need to take a step back in policies and procedures at our college that can deal with those individual students where they're at. And that's what we're trying to do with our business partners. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Eric.
Dr. K, I was going to say that's it's such a great point, that there's not going to be a one size fits all solution for these. It's going to take all of us working together, but also really looking at what are the unique challenges that our communities have, and what solutions on the table might work, and what unique changes might we have to make in order to help move those forward.
We do have a question from the audience. This question is for Dr. K. What advice do you have for developing local attainment projects like the one that you've been leading in your communities for other rural communities? What partners need to be a part of developing local goals like the ones that you all have done?
Yeah, we are, I believe that we're slightly ahead of the game, but I do know that there's other communities and other community colleges as well that have been working on this initiative. One of the things that I have found that's always worked when it comes to developing these partnerships is getting the educational leaders around the table with those business and industry leaders, your Chamber of Commerce, who hears a lot about what's going on in the businesses that they represent, your economic development folks who are working with industry, who are asking questions about what kind of workforce do you have? Tell me about high school graduation rates. Tell me about college going rates. Tell me about college completion rates. What kind of workforce are you developing? If we can get those people around the table to then begin to look at the data points that tells the right story. If you get those people around the table, and that can start with just a breakfast meeting with the right people. That can start with the local chamber workforce development board that we have here in Kingman, where now I have the opportunity every one Wednesday a month to be able to share new information about what we're doing, but you have other local business leaders around the table. If you have that breakfast meeting, then it's follow-up. It's okay, we got some headway. We got 5-6 people interested. And that's what happened with our steering committee. Donna Davis, I'm sure if she wanted to pipe in right now, she can talk about the early stages of our 6-7 people, I think, started it. And it was economic development. It was so forth. And higher and education leaders. So, and that grew into, I think, now 12 individuals that are now on the steering committee representing all 5 of those community hubs. And so it's very important that we had that, but it all started with that small conversation, the right people at the table, the right information in front of them, and with the same desire to, hey, we got to do something about this attainment.
And Dr. K, I think that Donna shared with us that there were about 60 people on that Northwest Attainment kickoff event that you had just a few weeks ago. So it's not just those 12 people on those steering committees, but there's a lot of energy in the communities in Mojave and La Paz County around this.
Yeah, we got very blessed and lucky to have of each of the 5 communities to really pick and establish great community hub leads. And then they helped identify membership. And if I went through the document, I think we're probably close to 80 or so now members identified. But at that convening, you're exactly right. I think we had 60 people.
Thank you, Dr. Hay. We do have another question that has come in about And you both have talked about this a little bit, but I wonder if there's anything else you'd like to share about what role can community leaders play in ensuring students of color and low-income students succeed? And that would be students at all levels, right? Those in college or going to college, early education, K-12. What can community leaders do to help make sure they're successful?
I didn't want to interrupt Thomas if he was ready to go. Just real quick on my end, I think understanding, again, not just the data, but really taking a look at what are the barriers that get put in place that, and I'm just going to use this term, and I'm in the midst of reading the book From Equity Talk to Equity Walk. It really is pretty neat about higher education and things that we can do to not just talk about equity, but actually to develop the processes and rethink our practices. And that's the big one, is the front part is doing the self-examination of how are we, but also what barriers are we putting in place by certain policies and practices, whether it be admissions policies, whether it be how we assign students into remedial education and the testing that's involved to actual just normal testing that happens at the K through 12 level. What are all those things? And are we actually taking a look at that from an equity viewpoint and then reestablishing and rethinking about those policies and procedures differently? And I'm going to use this term, getting rid of the whiteness that comes around sometimes of how those are developed and rethinking it. And that's a big task, but it's worthwhile, because the end outcome is then more of those students are able to get through the door because those barriers are being torn down. There's equity now being played in the classroom. There's equity being played in the engagement aspect, in extracurricular activities, into whatever else. And that's kind of how I see it. And I hope that Mojave and even Arizona Western, we continue to look at those to tear down those barriers.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Dr. K just shared. I would add in, I think the best thing that you can give is yourself, and being involved and engaged. But I think also it's like clarifying that you're a lifelong learner, because you may not be educated on what are the different inequities or what the differences are. So just doing your research in history, and I mean, Arizona is such an amazing place because it was between the Native American history and African American history, and you educating yourself and even approaching it as a student yourself, and then helping them get to those roadmaps and those things. I think just the humility in that itself will help them be able to learn, again, like Dr. K said, like out of a different framework than the whiteness by which our world is shaped around. I did have the privilege of going to historical Black College and University, where I was surrounded by all Black people. And I don't even want to just say African Americans, because we had Caribbean Americans and we had Africans who would come. And there was so much diversity right there, even within my own color and skin color. So there's still not like a one way fits all. But because it was an environment and an atmosphere where I was put down there, and it took off the barriers of me having to not just be the smartest Black kid in the room, or not to overcome all of those barriers would be the easiest way to say. Just removing those barriers put me in an environment where my senses didn't have to be thinking about other things, and I was able to focus a little bit more on my education. That is one of the benefits of being a community and a culture of people that look like you and also have a similar background in history like yours. So to reiterate the answer to that question, I think the best thing that you can offer is yourself and your resources. I tell a lot of people to begin learning how to think 4D, 4-dimensional. You know, we're different by design, but we're dynamic by decision, and we want to leave everyone with their own dignity. So if you are just continuing to instill dignity for people and allowing them to know the richness of their history and the legacy that they can leave, that to me is what you'll be able to be an effective community member.
Thank you both. We have another question from the audience. And it's about if there's a stigma against educational achievement in various communities. If so, what's a strategy to overcome that? Dr. K, do you want to start us off?
I just want to clarify, you're talking about stigma within, say that again, I'm sorry.
Is there a stigma against educational achievement in various communities? So would a community have any concerns about kids going on to college? Are there any roadblocks that you see?
When I came here, so when I came from Montana, that many of the people who lived in the district we were at actually had, it was amazing, actually had 2-year or 4-year degrees, a lot of them in the ag industry. So the students, their kids, and so when you take a look at the college going rate and so forth in the local high school, was pretty decent because that was instilled on them at an early age. I think what I've seen in the communities here, somewhat of what I've heard, is that because we're more of a first generation and our attainment is lower, therefore the stigma around, well, what's it really going to do for you? What are you going to get out of it? The stigma around cost, the stigma around, are your credits even going to transfer? Whatever else, it seems to kind of be there. And part of it is we need to start changing that. And sometimes what I've seen at some other institution is it has to do with low income or being economically disadvantaged. So if you come from a time of generational poverty, if you're the 5th or 4th generation, education is not seen as a way to get out of the generational poverty. And what we have seen in working with, like at one institution I was at with the Salvation Army, they totally rechanged the whole mechanism within that community with how they approach generational poverty, and education was at the core center. But it had to change that stigma around what education could do. I'm not smart enough. Self-efficacy is huge when you're a first generation student, low income student, a student of color, maybe if you're not seen as somebody who can be just as successful as my counterpart sitting across the aisle who might look differently than me. So I think there's a few of that. And our goal is to say, with our big goal is we want all of these adults who are out there, maybe started college, maybe didn't think that they were viable, maybe don't have their high school diploma, but they want to get their GED, to see us as a viable pathway, because an industry recognized credential can change their life. It can change the lives and the work environment of our communities as well, because it gets more people with the skill.
I could jump in really quickly. I think it's really empowering too over the last 5 years or so to see this change in vernacular, because there was a long time that I heard, as I advocated in the higher ed space, that college isn't for everybody. I had, when I was a young advocate a long time ago, I had a state legislator tell me the world needs plumbers too. You shouldn't, people shouldn't go to college. And I think the change of the vernacular to really talk about post-secondary education is not just college. It's beyond training, beyond high school. It's industry credentials. It's a class here or there to help become a lifelong learner. Thomas, to your point, they're all things that you can use to grow and to really help change that language. So getting a certificate isn't an alternative. It's a viable path that doesn't necessarily lead to an end. You can still do more. And I think that that work, the Achieve 60 goal, embodies that, talking about credentials and degrees, and just how we talk about these things a little bit differently than just even a decade ago, I think helps empower communities to see themselves and even see how that educational path, be it through a credential, be it through a degree, be it finishing a high school degree, getting a GED, can be so empowering moving forward.
And we have one last question that I'd love, Thomas, for your thoughts on. And that's, how can we create a culture that supports educational equity? It seems like we have some momentum around this for the first time, or at least for the first time in a long time in Arizona. But we also have a history of policy and funding that directly undercuts educational equity in the state. So how can we make this the priority education issue in our state?
Again, I think this is where the collective impact model comes in, of kind of exactly what was communicated about what you are doing down in Douglas and I believe in Yuma, of being that backbone organization. That's kind of how I serve as a community member, as a I kind of float around as that backbone organization, because as long as we can do that and come into these situations in these locations, taking off our banners and taking off our labels, and then having these conversations and facilitating these conversations with all of the stakeholders sitting at the table. And then we have to have the skill set to be able to communicate to all of the different sectors. Because what the faith community wants is a little bit different than what the business sector wants. And what the business sector wants is a little bit different than the nonprofit sector wants. And you have to be able to have the vernacular to go in and out of those different conversations, because each stakeholder within the community, they want something different that can continue to move towards progress. And it looks different for each one individual, just like the parent who's staying at home. Like, they have a different language. So it's almost like learning how to be bilingual or trilingual or multiple languages of like, okay, now that I'm sitting with a business owner, how can we begin to use the data that we have and the accurate data that we have and show them how this impacts their numbers on the long run? And then the nonprofit sector, how can we have a conversation with this person of showing them how the purpose of your organization and the mission that you all are having, how does this impact that, and how you can thrive, and how having a thriving education system supports that and encourages that. And I can go on and on with all the different people sitting at the table, but I think this collective impact model is really going to be an effective way. And then we have to go into the sources of entertainment. And then we have to go into the financial sector of the businesses and what type of media that they're getting access to. And then the financial literacy piece has to be incorporated as well, because that what leads into home ownership. And then there's more buy-in into the school and the taxes, and then who you're voting for. So that strategy of collective impact, being a backbone organization, being able to have different conversations or bring in people that can have those conversations, to me is the winning strategy.
Thank you all so much. With that, we'll wrap up the chat and Q&A and turn it back over to Tracy.
Great. Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much for the great questions for those of you who submitted them. We learn a lot from those who are working in the field every day on these issues. So again, we can't thank Dr. Kay and Thomas enough for joining us here today and being so generous with their time and their thoughts. So at this time, I'd like to turn things over to Ron Butler for a few closing remarks. Ron's our board chair-elect and has also been serving as the treasurer of Expect More Arizona. Ron?
Great, thank you, Tracy. And I think our host might be controlling my video, so if they can turn me on, that would be great. All right, thank you all, including our terrific guest speakers. I am a first-generation college student from rural Arizona, and I'm humbled by the work of our guests. This is extremely valuable work in our community, and I couldn't be more proud of what you're doing. Expect More Arizona has been doing really important work for over a decade across the entire state and throughout the education continuum. We're the only organization working to support P20 education statewide in this way. Among the many accomplishments, Expect More Arizona has shifted the culture statewide to consistently make education the top priority. Now the organization is poised to lead another key shift. With the Arizona Education Progress Meter goal still top of mind, Expect More Arizona will focus on education and equity in education. Just as we've made education a top issue among Arizonans, we want to make closing the achievement gap a top issue. We'll be building the case to Arizonans about why it's critical to close our achievement gaps. This means making sure that we're prioritizing the voices and needs of our Black, Latino, American Indian, low-income, disabled, rural, and English language learning students. It also requires putting systems in place to ensure that every student has the opportunity for an equal chance for success. To do so requires understanding the unique challenges and barriers faced by individual students or populations of students and providing additional supports to help them overcome those barriers. Our local and state economy depends on addressing equity issues. Economic development and robust talent pipeline depends on addressing equity issues. And our individual quality of life depends on addressing these equity issues. So to wrap up, my call to action to all of you is to support Expect More Arizona. Your investment in the organization will make it possible for us to drive our work forward, to close achievement gaps, and meet the goals in the progress meter. For those of you who are part of our 1010 Giving Society, we offer you our most sincere thanks. Thank you for walking in partnership with us the last year as we've done this difficult work. We ask for your continued support and the renewal of your gift. If you're not currently involved as a donor to Expect More Arizona, we'd appreciate your financial support and investment to move this work forward. Please know we can't do this work without your support. I have a great deal of confidence in Expect More's ability to successfully lead this critical work, but they can't do it alone. Thank once again to all of you joining us this afternoon. Have a great evening, and please make sure you get out there and vote, and please vote for education.